After the 1967 war, Israel had tripled in size. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now wants to annex part of that land in biblical Judea and Samaria, as laid out in President Trump's annexation plan. Just about 10 miles away from here is Efrat. It's part of the Gush Etzion settlement block and part of the land in question in the annexation plan. We went out to Efrat and talked to their mayor, Oded Revivi, about the annexation plan. Well, Mayor, first of all, thanks for joining us on CBN News. So Efrat right now is also in the middle of a very big story right now, annexation, sovereignty, and the Trump peace plan. What is annexation right now in your view?
We are definitely in historical times. After being in Judea and Samaria with Jewish presence for the last 53 years, under this current administration, a massive change has come to the attitude of the United States towards this land. It started off with moving the embassy. It continued with the recognition of the Golan Heights being part of Israel. It carried on with Secretary Pompeo's declaration saying that the settlements are not against international law. And now we are just a few weeks away from, hopefully, the beginning of the implementation of the Trump deal. The Trump deal is a vision for peace to try and create a better atmosphere in this region. The legal concept is applying Israeli law where Jews live today, which basically would mean that our status will equal to the status of the rest of the residents of Israel. And for somebody who lives here, somebody who studied law, was acting as a lawyer, somebody who serves today as a mayor, I can give you endless examples where there are two different sets of rules to the people who live in Israel, to the Jews living in Judea and Samaria. And in that respect, it is an historical significance that this might happen within the next few weeks.
Would you say there's a difference in the reality here on the ground and the perception that the world has when they look at the West Bank, Judea and Samaria?
Again, let me reflect your smile, because you know the answer to the question. People see headlines, sometimes created by the media, who have an interest in showing conflict, in showing battles, in showing bloodshed. If we would have had time, I would have taken you down the road from here to our supermarket, where you would see Jews and Arabs walking up and down the same aisles in the same shopping center, paying in the same currency, coming to a cashier who can be an Arab or a Jew, paying and going back home to feed their kids. You drove on a road leading up to Efrat, which against all allegations of apartheid state is open both for Jews and Arabs who drive freely on the same streets, on the same roads. I can only imagine people who haven't been here, people who they get their perspective through the media, thinking that you're crazy standing opposite me without a helmet, without a bulletproof vest. But this is the homeland of the Bible. You can see how peaceful the reality is and why the current administration realized that and took that as saying, let's see what has been created, let's see the strengths and try and build from that something stronger, better, for a better future for both people.
There are some Christians who feel that this is God's land, and according to the Bible, you should not divide it, and they're concerned about that. What would you say to them?
I agree. I agree. But you have to remember two things. Number one is we're dealing with a world that not everybody agrees with our interpretation of the Bible, and we need to get along with them as well. Number two, we're not giving away anything. The deal talks about what's happening in stage one, Israel applying Israeli law in 30% of the land. The other 70%, the Palestinian people need to take upon themselves about 10 conditions, which are all conditions that we as believers definitely pray for. That they will disarm their ammunition, that they will stop funding terrorists, that they will stop their claims over Jerusalem. A lot of things that we want to see happening as believers, as peace lovers, as people who pray for peace. Only then we start negotiations, which can lead up to 4 years. The American ambassador called it that the Palestinians will turn into Canadians. I prefer the biblical expression that wolves will turn into sheep, and then the reality will look completely different. And final point, as a believer, speaking to believers, understanding that nothing happens without God's interference, I don't think it's any coincidence that President Trump was elected. I don't think it's any coincidence that he is the one who's brought this plan to the table. He's giving us something that we didn't have before. Let's rely also on God, how he will play the cards about the future.
Well, Mayor, I appreciate your perspective and giving us your time about this very important matter.
Alpha, Omega.